Papers whispered across the glass desk like dry leaves in a storm. Rebecca's fingers shook so hard the last page blurred. The office smelled like cedar and money, polished wood, expensive cologne, and the quiet kind of power that made you forget how to breathe. Across from her, Kim Jun-Ho didn't move. He just watched. Not like a man watching a woman. Like a king watching a decision. "Sign," he said softly, almost politely, "and your family is saved. Refuse, and watch them burn." Rebecca swallowed. Her throat felt too small for her heartbeat. She forced her eyes down to the final clause. $5 billion. A fake marriage. 12 months. Public appearances. Absolute loyalty in public. Absolute distance in private. And the one sentence that made her spine go cold. Termination is at Mr. Kim's sole discretion. He leaned forward, forearms on the desk, suit jacket perfect, shirt cuffs immaculate. His gaze was sharp enough to cut a lie in half. Rebecca lifted the pen. The nib hovered over the signature line. Before the secret drops, subscribe if you love Afro-Korean Mafia romance stories. Her own voice in her head sounded steadier than her hands felt. She signed. Jun-Ho's eyes didn't soften. If anything, they darkened, like he'd been waiting for this moment longer than she could understand. Rebecca slid the contract back with a controlled calm she didn't feel. "Just remember," she said, meeting his stare, "this is a contract. Don't expect anything more." Jun-Ho's mouth curved, a slow smirk that never reached his eyes. $5 billion buys more than just a name, Mrs. Kim, he murmured. It buys control. The pen clicked as he capped it. Final, decisive. Somewhere in the building, a fountain bubbled. Somewhere in the city, someone laughed. Here, in this office, Rebecca felt the door of her old life close like a vault. And she didn't even realize she was holding her breath until Jun-Ho stood. "I thought I was signing away my freedom for money," Rebecca would later tell herself. "I didn't realize I was signing a deal with the devil, and falling in love was never in the fine print." Jun-Ho pressed a button on his desk. "Bring the car." Rebecca blinked. "Now." "Yes." His tone allowed no argument. "You move in tonight." She steadied herself, forcing her shoulders back. "I need to. Your family will receive the first transfer within the hour." He interrupted, calm as winter. "Any debts? Any threats?" "Handled. Handled." As if the word didn't carry 1,000 meanings when it belonged to men like him. Rebecca stood on legs that wanted to fold. She gathered her small bag, the only piece of her life she'd been allowed to bring into this room. Jun-Ho stepped closer, and for the first time, she noticed the small scar near his knuckle, pale against his skin. A memory of violence he never had to explain. A warning the world had already tried him and lost. His voice dropped. "From this moment, you don't belong to your problems anymore." Rebecca's pulse jumped. "And I belong to you." He didn't deny it. He simply said, 3 weeks earlier, you were a woman with a sinking family. Today, you become Mrs. Kim. Don't disappoint me." The car arrived, and Rebecca stepped into it like she was stepping into a story she couldn't pause. 3 weeks earlier, Rebecca's life didn't look like polished wood and glass desks. It looked like overdue notices stacked on a kitchen table. It looked like a father who laughed too loudly when he was scared. It looked like a mother who stopped buying her favorite tea and started smiling through clenched teeth. It looked like Rebecca's younger brother, Samuel, pretending he didn't hear the arguments through the thin walls. The first time the men came to the house, Rebecca thought it was a mistake. A knock, too hard, too confident. Her father opened the door. Rebecca didn't see the man's face clearly, but she saw the way her father's shoulders collapsed. "We can pay," her father pleaded, voice thin. "Give me 1 more week." A hand pushed him back. A voice, casual, cruel. "You said that last week." Rebecca stepped forward. "What is this?" The man's gaze flicked over her like she was furniture. "Tell your father to stop gambling with money he doesn't have." "I don't gamble," her father snapped. Then his eyes dropped, ashamed. Rebecca's stomach tightened. "Dad." The man smiled as if he enjoyed watching families crack. "You've got 72 hours. He left without another word. That night, Rebecca sat with her mother on the edge of the bed. Her mother's hands were cold. "Your father is not a bad man," her mother whispered. "He's just weak in one place." Rebecca clenched her jaw. She wanted to be angry. She was angry, but anger didn't pay debts. "What do we owe?" Rebecca asked. Her mother hesitated. Rebecca's voice turned firm. "Tell me." Her mother exhaled like she'd been holding the truth underwater. Too much. Rebecca did what she always did when the world demanded something impossible. She made a plan. She sold her laptop. She sold her jewelry. She called people who owed favors. She begged, politely at first, then desperately. She walked into banks with printed proposals and walked out with sympathetic smiles. One manager leaned back in his chair and said, "Miss Rebecca, you are impressive, but you're asking for a miracle." Rebecca smiled like she wasn't breaking. "Then point me to someone who sells miracles." He didn't. The next day, she tried again. Another bank. Another office. Another closed door. The humiliation wasn't loud. It was quiet. It was being spoken to slowly, like she couldn't understand. It was being offered financial advice when she needed a lifeline. It was being told, again and again, that her father's debt was not the bank's problem. By the end of the week, Rebecca felt like she was running down a hallway that kept extending every time she thought she reached the exit. Then, on the seventh day, she got a message from someone she barely trusted. A woman named Nia, who worked events in high places. "There's a man who might help. He's dangerous. He's Korean. And he doesn't do charity." Rebecca stared at the message until the letters blurred. She typed back, "What does he want?" Nia's reply came fast. "A wife. On paper. A contract. And he pays like he's buying the world." Rebecca laughed once, sharp and humorless, then stopped because tears rose unexpectedly. A fake wife. A contract. $5 billion. The number felt unreal, like a myth. But desperation makes myths feel like maps. "Who is he?" Rebecca asked. Nia sent an address. A time. A warning. "Don't try to be cute. Don't lie. Don't flirt. And whatever you do, don't call him Mr. Kim, like everyone else. He hates that." Rebecca read that last line twice, as if it mattered. It shouldn't have, but it did. The night she went to meet him, she wore her only good suit. She put her hair back. She kept her face bare except for light concealer, because she wanted to look like a woman who belonged in a room with powerful men, even if she didn't feel like one. The building was in a part of the city where the streetlights were brighter and the doors were heavier. Security checked her bag. Someone scanned her eyes. Someone took her phone. She followed a silent assistant through halls that smelled like money. Then the door opened, and Rebecca saw him for the first time. Kim Jun-Ho sat behind a desk like it was a throne. He wore black, not flashy, sharp, clean, controlled. His hair was neatly styled. His face was calm in a way that made other people seem messy by comparison. He looked up, and Rebecca felt something in her chest tighten. Not fear. Not exactly. It was the awareness that this man was used to deciding who lived comfortably and who didn't. He didn't stand. He didn't smile. He studied her. "Rebecca Adeyemi," he said, pronouncing her surname correctly, like he'd practiced. Rebecca's eyebrows lifted slightly. "You did your research." His gaze sharpened. "You think you're special because I know your name?" "No," Rebecca replied, keeping her voice steady. "I think you're dangerous because you know it." For the first time, something flickered in his eyes. Interest, maybe. Amusement. He gestured to the chair. "Sit." Rebecca sat. Jun-Ho placed a folder on the desk. "Your father owes money to people who don't forgive," he said. Rebecca's hands curled into fists in her lap. "I know. You've tried banks," he continued. "Loans. Investors. You're intelligent. You're stubborn. You're running out of time." Rebecca forced herself not to react. "You're enjoying this." Jun-Ho's expression didn't change. "I enjoy clarity." He slid the folder closer. "This is my offer." Rebecca opened it and found the contract. It wasn't romantic. It was brutally practical. Public role, wife. Private boundaries. None of his people touch her. None of her people embarrass him. No intimacy required. No independent interviews. No social posts without approval. No leaving the mansion alone without security. And the reason, buried in clean legal language. To secure a merger and political alliance requiring a family man image. Rebecca looked up. "So you need a wife to look respectable." "I need a wife," Jun-Ho corrected, "to appear stable." Rebecca's mouth tightened. "And I'm what? A prop?" Jun-Ho leaned back. "You are a solution." Rebecca read the number again. $5 billion. Her stomach twisted. Why pay so much for a solution? Jun-Ho's gaze stayed on her. "Because I don't tolerate failure." Rebecca's throat went dry. "How do I know you won't?" She stopped herself. "How do I know you won't ruin me?" Jun-Ho answered the fear she didn't speak. "Because if I ruin you, I ruin my own reputation." Rebecca looked down at the contract again. The termination clause. At his discretion. Power imbalance. Total. She looked up. If I sign this, my family is safe. Jun-Ho's voice was calm. Your father's debt is cleared. Any threats against your family disappear. Disappear. Rebecca's jaw clenched. You talk like people are paperwork. Jun-Ho's eyes narrowed slightly. In my world, paperwork decides who breathes. Rebecca held his gaze, refusing to blink first. Then in your world, I'm breathing because you want me to. Silence stretched. Then Jun-Ho said, you're brave. Or foolish. Rebecca's smile was thin. Sometimes those are the same thing. He watched her a moment longer, then pushed the pen across the desk. And we know what happened next. Now, back in the present, Rebecca stood at the gates of Jun-Ho's mansion like she'd stepped into a different universe. The house wasn't just big. It was a statement. Tall iron gates. Clean stone paths. Dark glass windows that reflected the night like secrets. A line of staff waited inside, quiet and perfectly aligned. Jun-Ho's assistant, an elegant woman named Ms. Han, led Rebecca through rooms that looked like magazines. Marble floors, high ceilings, art that probably cost more than Rebecca's entire neighborhood. This will be your room, Ms. Han said, opening a door. Rebecca froze. It wasn't a room. It was a suite. Bedroom, sitting area, private bathroom bigger than her old kitchen. Rebecca turned slowly. Where does Mr. Kim sleep? Ms. Han's expression didn't change. The master suite. Across the hall. Across the hall. Not with her. The contract's boundaries were already being enforced. Rebecca exhaled a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. Ms. Han handed her a small folder. Your schedule. Your wardrobe fittings. Your media coaching. And your phone. It's been replaced for security. Replaced. Rebecca accepted it. Do I get to call my mother? You may call your mother, Ms. Han said. But do not discuss the details of the agreement. Rebecca nodded. And if I do? Ms. Han's gaze was polite, but sharp. Mr. Kim dislikes surprises. That night, Rebecca called home. Her mother answered on the second ring. Rebecca? Oh my God, where are you? Are you safe? Rebecca swallowed the lump in her throat. I'm safe. Mom, it's handled. A pause. What do you mean, handled? Rebecca could hear Samuel in the background, asking her mother who it was. Rebecca forced warmth into her voice. I found help. The debt is gone. Her mother's breath caught. How? Rebecca stared at the enormous window overlooking a garden lit like a dream. I took a job. Her mother hesitated. A job that clears everything? Rebecca's voice softened. Yes. Her mother didn't ask again, but her silence was heavy with fear. Rebecca, her mother whispered. Please, don't sacrifice yourself. Rebecca closed her eyes. I'm not, Mom. I'm choosing. Even as she said it, she wondered if it was true. When she ended the call, she sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the contract copy she'd been given. Wife. Fake. For a year. Rebecca's mind tried to calculate how she could survive 12 months with a man like Kim Jun-Ho without losing herself. Then a knock came at the door. Rebecca looked up. Another knock. Calm, controlled. She stood and opened it. Jun-Ho stood there in a black shirt without a tie, jacket draped over his arm. His hair was slightly less rigid than before, but his eyes were the same, sharp, watchful. You settled in, he said. Rebecca kept her posture straight. I'm not sure settled is the word. Jun-Ho stepped inside without asking permission, glancing around as if assessing whether she'd break something. Rebecca's pulse ticked up. Is this a visit or an inspection? Jun-Ho looked at her. It's a reminder. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small velvet box. Rebecca's brows drew together. What's that? Jun-Ho opened it. A ring. Not loud. Not gaudy. A diamond that looked like a piece of frozen lightning. Rebecca's throat tightened. That's ridiculous. Jun-Ho's voice was flat. It's necessary. Rebecca stared at it, then at him. Necessary for who? For the people watching, Jun-Ho replied. They will look for weakness. They will look for doubt. They will look for proof you are not mine. Rebecca stiffened at the word mine. Jun-Ho took her hand, only for a second. His fingers were warm, steady. He slid the ring onto her finger with smooth precision. Rebecca's skin prickled. The ring felt heavy, like a promise she didn't want to make. Jun-Ho released her hand immediately, as if touch was just another task. Tomorrow, he said, we begin training. Training, Rebecca repeated. Jun-Ho's gaze pinned her. You don't smile when you're nervous. You press your lips together. You raise your left shoulder when you feel threatened. Fix it. Rebecca's eyes widened. You've been watching me that closely? Jun-Ho stepped closer. My enemies watch more closely. Rebecca forced herself to breathe. Fine. I'll play my role. Jun-Ho's voice lowered. Not play. Live it. If you look uncertain for 1 second, they will test you. Rebecca's chin lifted. And what happens if they test me? Jun-Ho's expression turned colder, like a door locking. Then they answer to me. Rebecca's stomach flipped. He turned to leave, then paused at the door. Without looking back, he said, Do not wander the mansion at night. There are men here who would mistake curiosity for disobedience. Rebecca's eyes narrowed. Are you warning me about them, or about you? Jun-Ho looked over his shoulder. For the first time, she saw something else behind the control. A flash of something sharp and protective. I am warning you, he said. That being Mrs. Kim makes you a target. Then he left. Rebecca stood in the silent room, staring at the door he'd closed. Target. Wife. Contract. 5 billion. She whispered to herself. I can do 12 months. But her heart didn't sound convinced. The next week was a blur of transformation. Stylists brought racks of dresses. Tailors measured her, as if she were a statue being carved. A media coach taught her how to answer questions without revealing anything. A posture instructor corrected her stance until her shoulders stopped carrying the weight of poverty. Jun-Ho watched it all from a distance. He appeared like a shadow in the background, sometimes in meetings, sometimes in hallways. Always present, always controlled. Rebecca began to notice details she didn't want to notice. How he spoke quietly, yet everyone obeyed faster than they would for a man who shouted. How he held doors for elderly staff without looking for praise. How his gaze softened for half a second when he thought no one was watching, then turned cold again. And how, when Rebecca stumbled once on a step because her heels were too high, Jun-Ho's hand shot out instinctively to steady her. Then he pulled back like touch was a danger he refused. Their first public debut came sooner than she expected. A charity gala. The kind of place where money dressed up and pretended it had a heart. The mansion buzzed with preparation. Rebecca stood in front of a mirror as Ms. Han adjusted her hair. Rebecca wore a deep emerald dress that hugged her like confidence. Her makeup was elegant, her skin glowing, her eyes focused. She looked like a woman who belonged beside a king. But inside, her pulse was frantic. Jun-Ho entered the room behind her, and the air shifted. He wore a black tuxedo like it was armor. His expression was calm, but his eyes were alert, scanning, assessing. Rebecca met his gaze in the mirror. Jun-Ho stepped closer. Remember, he said, voice low, don't speak unless you must. Let them watch you, not hear you. Rebecca's eyes narrowed slightly. So I'm decoration. Jun-Ho's gaze flicked to her. You're my wife. The word landed heavier than it should have. Rebecca turned to face him. I don't belong to you. Jun-Ho's expression didn't change. In public, you do. Rebecca exhaled through her nose. Fine. In public. Jun-Ho reached out, not to touch her skin, but to adjust the necklace at her collarbone. His fingers grazed the fabric of her dress. Rebecca's breath caught. Jun-Ho's voice dropped. If anyone disrespects you, you don't react. You look at me. Rebecca held his gaze, her voice barely above a whisper. And you'll do what? Jun-Ho's eyes darkened. I'll remind them who you are. Ms. Han cleared her throat softly, pretending not to exist. Jun-Ho offered his arm. Rebecca hesitated for a fraction of a second, then placed her hand on his arm. His muscles were solid under the fabric. His presence was overwhelming. They walked out together. The ballroom was a sea of glitter and whispers. The moment Jun-Ho entered, conversations shifted. Faces turned. Some smiled. Some tightened. Some calculated. Rebecca felt eyes on her like heat. Jun-Ho leaned slightly toward her. Smile, he murmured. Rebecca smiled. And the room reacted like she'd passed a test. They moved through greetings, introductions, handshakes. People called her Mrs. Kim with curiosity, suspicion, and hidden aggression. A woman in a silver dress approached, beautiful, sharp-eyed, with a smile that didn't belong to kindness. Jun-Ho, the woman purred, as if she owned the right to say his name. You finally brought a wife. Jun-Ho's gaze didn't change. Chairwoman Park. Chairwoman. Political power. Business power. Danger. Chairwoman Park's eyes scanned Rebecca. She's unexpected. Rebecca kept her smile polite. I'm glad to meet you. Chairwoman Park tilted her head. Where did you find her? Jun-Ho's voice was calm. She found me. Rebecca's eyes widened slightly at that. Then she hit it fast. Chairwoman Park's smile sharpened. How romantic. Rebecca's fingers tightened on Jun-Ho's arm. The woman's tone wasn't curiosity. It was a blade wrapped in perfume. Jun-Ho guided Rebecca away, but whispers followed them like shadows. Later, as they stood near a grand staircase, a man approached, tall, arrogant, with a drink in his hand and entitlement on his face. Mr. Kim, he said, voice too loud. I didn't know you were the marrying type. Jun-Ho's gaze turned to him, calm and deadly. And yet, the man laughed. Is she real? Or is this another one of your business tricks? Rebecca felt heat rise in her face. Jun-Ho didn't look at her. He looked at the man. Apologized, Jun-Ho said. The man blinked. For what? For questioning my wife, Jun-Ho replied. The man's smile faltered. It was a joke. Jun-Ho's voice lowered, smooth as ice. Then laugh elsewhere. Silence fell around them, like the room itself leaned in. The man's jaw tightened, but something in Jun-Ho's stillness forced submission. I apologize, the man muttered, eyes flicking to Rebecca. Rebecca kept her smile calm. Accepted. The man walked away fast. Rebecca turned to Jun-Ho, surprised. You didn't have to do that. Jun-Ho's gaze stayed forward. Yes, I did. Rebecca's heartbeat stuttered. Why? Jun-Ho's jaw tightened. Because disrespecting you is disrespecting me. Possessive. Protective. Dangerous. Rebecca should have been unsettled. Instead, something warm, confusing, and unwanted stirred in her chest. Quick one. If you're locked into this story, tap like so YouTube pushes it to more Afro-Korea romance fans. And comment Team Rebecca or Team JUNHO. I want to see who you're backing. The gala continued, but the atmosphere changed. People stopped testing Rebecca openly. They watched her instead. And Rebecca realized the truth. Jun-Ho didn't just want a wife for optics. He wanted a wife who could survive his world. As the night deepened, Rebecca stepped onto a balcony for air. The city stretched below like a field of lights. She breathed in, trying to calm her racing thoughts. Then she heard voices behind a partially open door. Jun-Ho's voice. Low. Controlled. Dangerous. The alliance closes in 2 weeks. The chairwoman will not finalize unless she believes I'm stable. Another man replied, nervous. And the wife. Jun-Ho's pause was brief. She's effective. She's also a risk, the man said. If they can't reach you, they'll reach her. Jun-Ho's voice turned colder. They will not reach her. What if they try? The man pressed. Jun-Ho's answer was quiet, absolute. Then they die socially, financially, and physically. However it must be done. Rebecca's chest tightened. So it was true. She wasn't just a prop. She was leverage. And her presence in Jun-Ho's life painted a target on her back. She backed away silently, heart pounding. A second later, the door opened, and Jun-Ho stepped out. His gaze found her instantly, like he'd been aware of her even while speaking. Rebecca forced a calm expression. Nice balcony. Jun-Ho studied her for a moment. How much did you hear? Rebecca lifted her chin. Enough. Jun-Ho's eyes narrowed. Then you understand why you must follow the rules. Rebecca's voice sharpened. I understand you hired me as bait. Jun-Ho stepped closer, his presence tightening the air. I hired you as a shield. Rebecca's laugh was bitter. A shield doesn't get a choice. Jun-Ho's gaze flickered. You chose when you signed. Rebecca's eyes glistened, but she refused to let the tears fall. I chose to save my family, not to be hunted. Jun-Ho's voice lowered. You will not be hunted. Rebecca stared at him. You can't control everything. For the first time, Jun-Ho's control cracked, just slightly. You're right, he said, voice tight. I can't. The admission startled her. He leaned closer, his voice almost a whisper. That's why you stay close to me. Rebecca's pulse jumped at the intimacy of the words. Why? She demanded. Because it looks good? Because it keeps your merger alive? Jun-Ho's gaze held hers, intense. Because if anything happens to you, I will not forgive myself. The balcony went silent. Rebecca's chest tightened. That wasn't in the contract. Before she could respond, Ms. Han appeared at the doorway, expression composed. Mr. Kim, she said quietly. We have a problem. Jun-Ho's head turned instantly. Speak. There's been movement, Ms. Han said. A rival group is here. They weren't invited. Rebecca's stomach dropped. Jun-Ho's expression turned to stone. Get her inside. He took Rebecca's arm. Not gently, but firmly, guiding her back into the ballroom with controlled speed. Rebecca's mind raced. Rival group. Attack? Humiliation? A message? They moved through the crowd as if nothing was wrong, but Rebecca felt the shift in energy, like the room itself had sensed danger. A man stepped into their path. Tall, smiling, too casual. He held a drink in one hand, but his eyes were cold. Jun-Ho, he said, congratulations on your marriage. Jun-Ho stopped, gaze steady. Min-suk. The name landed like a warning. Min-suk's eyes slid to Rebecca. So this is the wife. Rebecca kept her posture perfect. Yes. Min-suk smiled wider. Beautiful, brave, or just unaware. Rebecca's fingers tightened around Jun-Ho's arm, but she didn't flinch. Jun-Ho's voice was calm. Leave. Min-suk chuckled. Not yet. I came to give you a gift. His gaze returned to Rebecca. Rebecca felt her skin prickle. Min-suk spoke softly, but the words were sharp. Do you know what your husband does, Mrs. Kim? Rebecca's voice was steady. I know enough. Min-suk's smile turned cruel. Then you know wives don't last long in his world. Jun-Ho's grip on Rebecca tightened. The room around them felt suddenly quieter, like people were pretending not to listen while listening harder than ever. Min-suk lifted his glass in mock salute. Enjoy your year, Mrs. Kim. Rebecca's heart pounded. Jun-Ho stepped forward, just slightly, his presence a wall. Min-suk's smile faltered for a second. Then he backed away, disappearing into the crowd like smoke. Jun-Ho didn't chase him. He turned to Ms. Han. We leave. Now. They exited the ballroom with perfect composure, as if they were simply tired of the party. But the moment the car doors shut, Jun-Ho's calm snapped into something sharper. Who allowed him in? He demanded. Ms. Han's voice was controlled. We're investigating. Rebecca stared out the window, city lights streaking like blurred threats. Jun-Ho's gaze shifted to her. Are you hurt? Rebecca shook her head. No. Jun-Ho's jaw tightened. Good. Rebecca swallowed. That was a warning. Jun-Ho didn't deny it. Yes. Rebecca turned to him. How bad is it? Jun-Ho's eyes met hers. Bad enough that you stop thinking this is just a contract. Rebecca's breath caught. So what is it then? Jun-Ho's gaze held hers, intense. It's survival. The next day, Jun-Ho's mansion felt different. More security. More eyes. More silence. Rebecca tried to ignore it, focusing on her role, her routines, her controlled smile. But the fear sat behind her ribs like a second heartbeat. That evening, she sat in the library, huge shelves, leather chairs, quiet that tasted expensive. She opened a book, but the words didn't enter her mind. Then Jun-Ho walked in. He didn't announce himself. He never did. He moved like he belonged to every shadow. Rebecca looked up. Are you going to keep pretending this is normal? Jun-Ho's gaze landed on her. Normal is irrelevant. Rebecca's voice hardened. Min-suk threatened me. Jun-Ho's eyes narrowed. Min-suk threatened me through you. Rebecca stood, frustration boiling. So I'm a tool. Jun-Ho stepped closer, his calm unnerving. You're not a tool. Rebecca's laugh was sharp. Then what am I? Jun-Ho paused. Just a fraction. Then he said, You're the only variable I didn't anticipate. Rebecca's chest tightened. That's not an answer. Jun-Ho's gaze stayed on her, and for the first time, Rebecca saw it clearly. This man did not like uncertainty. He lived by control like oxygen, and she was disrupting his control. Jun-Ho's voice lowered. You're intelligent. You're composed. You don't break easily. Rebecca stared at him. Is that supposed to comfort me? Jun-Ho's jaw tightened. It should. Rebecca stepped closer, fearless now because fear was exhausting. Tell me the truth. What happens after the year ends? Jun-Ho's silence was too long. Rebecca's eyes widened. You were going to cut me loose. Jun-Ho didn't deny it. Rebecca felt something crack in her chest. Not love. Not yet. Something more fragile. Disappointment. Jun-Ho's voice was quiet. That was the plan. Rebecca's laugh was bitter. Of course it was. Jun-Ho's gaze sharpened. It was logical. Rebecca's eyes glistened. Logical doesn't mean human. Jun-Ho stared at her like she'd spoken a language he understood but didn't like. Then Ms. Han appeared at the doorway again, face tight. Mr. Kim, she said. We have another problem. Jun-Ho's head snapped toward her. Speak. Ms. Han swallowed. There's been a breach. One of our accounts, your merger file, someone accessed it. Rebecca's stomach dropped. Jun-Ho's expression turned lethal. Who? Ms. Han shook her head. Not confirmed. Jun-Ho turned to Rebecca. Stay here. Rebecca's voice was sharp. No. Jun-Ho's eyes narrowed. This is not a debate. Rebecca stepped forward. I'm not your decoration. If someone is targeting your merger, that's targeting me too. Jun-Ho's jaw tightened. You don't understand. Rebecca cut him off. I understand enough. You said I'm a variable. Fine. Let me be useful. Jun-Ho's gaze held hers. A long, tense moment. Then he said, follow. They moved to a secured office inside the mansion, monitors, files, security staff. Rebecca's mind clicked into analysis mode, the part of her that had survived poverty by being sharp. She studied the access logs, the patterns, the timing. This isn't random, she murmured. Jun-Ho's gaze flicked to her. Explain. Rebecca pointed. The breach happened during a shift change. Whoever did it knew your system. They wanted you to assume it was an outside attack. Jun-Ho's eyes narrowed. So it's inside. Rebecca nodded. A distraction. Jun-Ho's voice was low. From what? Rebecca's eyes scanned the logs again. Then she froze. Your wife, she whispered. Jun-Ho's gaze sharpened. What? Rebecca's voice turned firm. They're creating chaos in your operation so your attention is split. Then they'll move on me. Publicly or privately. To weaken you. Jun-Ho's jaw flexed. Rebecca looked at him. You need to announce increased security around me. Loudly. Jun-Ho's eyes narrowed. That will make them move faster. Rebecca nodded. Exactly. Force them to rush. Force them to make mistakes. Jun-Ho stared at her, then gave a short, sharp command to his people. They moved instantly. Rebecca exhaled, adrenaline rushing. Jun-Ho stepped closer. You're sure? Rebecca met his gaze. I've been surviving threats my whole life, Jun-Ho. Yours are just richer. For the first time, a real hint of amusement tugged at his mouth. Then it vanished as a guard rushed in. Mr. Kim, the guard said. We found a device. Rebecca's stomach tightened. A device. The guard held up a small object, something that didn't belong in the mansion. Jun-Ho's expression turned ice cold. Where? In the guest hallway, the guard replied. Near Mrs. Kim's suite. Rebecca's blood went cold. Jun-Ho's gaze snapped to her. You were right. Rebecca's voice was tight. So what now? Jun-Ho stepped closer, his voice low and fierce. Now we set a trap. That night, Rebecca didn't sleep. She sat in her suite, lights dim, heart pounding. Jun-Ho had placed additional security outside her door, but the fear didn't care about guards. It lived inside her. A soft knock came. Rebecca's muscles tensed. Who is it? Jun-Ho's voice. Open. Rebecca opened the door. Jun-Ho stepped in, closing it behind him. He looked different, less polished, more dangerous. Like the man behind the tuxedo had stepped forward. Rebecca's throat went dry. What are you doing here? Jun-Ho's gaze was intense. You don't sleep tonight. Rebecca blinked. Excuse me. Jun-Ho's voice was calm. You stay awake. You stay alert. If they move, you move when I tell you. Rebecca stared at him. So I'm bait. Jun-Ho's jaw tightened. You're protected bait. Rebecca's laugh was shaky. That's supposed to be comforting? Jun-Ho stepped closer, and for the first time, he looked conflicted. This is my fault, he said quietly. Rebecca's heart stuttered. What? Jun-Ho's voice was low. I brought you into this. Rebecca stared at him, shocked by the honesty. Jun-Ho's gaze held hers. I told myself you were just a contract. A solution. Something I could control. Rebecca's voice was soft. And now? Jun-Ho's jaw tightened. Now you're you. Rebecca swallowed hard. That's still not an answer. Jun-Ho's eyes flicked down to her ring, then back up. Then he said, quietly, pause and tell me this. What would you do in her position? Comment your answer. Best comment gets pinned. Rebecca blinked at the weird timing of the thought, like she'd heard her own story being told from outside herself. Then the moment snapped back into reality when Jun-Ho's phone buzzed. He checked it. His expression hardened. They're moving, he said. Rebecca's breath caught. Now. Jun-Ho nodded. Stay behind me. Rebecca's voice shook, but she forced strength into it. No. Tell me what to do. Jun-Ho stared at her for a beat, then said, if I say run, you run. If I say stop, you stop. Do not argue. Rebecca nodded. Okay. They stepped into the hallway. Guards moved silently, positions tightening like a net. Rebecca's heart pounded so loud she wondered if enemies could hear it. Then, movement at the far end of the corridor. A shadow. A figure. One of the guards reacted fast, blocking the path. A scuffle. Quick, controlled, no chaos. Jun-Ho didn't move. He just watched. Rebecca realized something chilling. He wasn't nervous. He was calculating. Then a second figure appeared, closer than expected, coming from a side passage. Rebecca's breath caught. Jun-Ho's hand shot out, pulling her behind him. The second figure froze as 3 guards surrounded him. The figure lifted his hands slowly, smirking. "It's just business, Mr. Kim," the man said. Jun-Ho's voice was quiet. "Whose business?" The man's smirk widened. "Min-suk's." Rebecca's stomach dropped. Jun-Ho's gaze turned lethal. "Take him." The guards moved. The man struggled, but he was outnumbered. Rebecca's hands shook. Jun-Ho turned to her, voice low. "Go back inside. Lock the door." Rebecca hesitated. Jun-Ho. His gaze snapped to hers. "Now." Rebecca ran back into her suite, locking the door, heart pounding. She pressed her back to the wood, breathing hard. Then she heard something outside, a muffled shout, then silence. Minutes passed like hours. Finally, a knock. Rebecca's voice shook. "Who is it?" Jun-Ho's voice. "Open." Rebecca opened the door. Jun-Ho stood there, calm again, but his eyes were darker. Rebecca searched his face. "Is it over?" Jun-Ho's voice was tight. "For tonight." Rebecca swallowed. "And Min-suk?" Jun-Ho's jaw flexed. "Min-suk wanted to prove I couldn't protect my wife." Rebecca's voice softened. "Did you?" Jun-Ho stared at her for a long moment. Then he said, "Yes." Rebecca's chest tightened. "Then why do I still feel like I'm drowning?" Jun-Ho stepped inside, closing the door behind him. His voice lowered. "Because you're fighting a world you didn't grow up in." Rebecca's eyes glistened. "I grew up fighting. Just not this." Jun-Ho's gaze held hers. Then, slowly, he reached out. Not to grab, not to command, just to touch her hand. Rebecca's breath caught at the gentleness. Jun-Ho's voice was quiet. "You're not alone in this." Rebecca stared at him, confused by the warmth. "Why do you care?" she whispered. Jun-Ho's jaw tightened, as if admitting it hurt. "Because you stepped into my fire to save me." Rebecca blinked. "I didn't save you." Jun-Ho's gaze sharpened. "You did. You saw the pattern. You warned me. You didn't run." Rebecca's voice trembled. "I ran plenty." Jun-Ho's mouth curved slightly. "But you came back." Silence stretched. Rebecca's heart raced. She wanted to pull away. She didn't. Jun-Ho's voice dropped. "I was going to end this after the alliance. Clean. Simple. You'd have your money. Your family. Your freedom." Rebecca swallowed hard. "And now?" Jun-Ho stared at her like he was battling himself. Then he said, "Now I don't want to." Rebecca's breath caught. Jun-Ho released her hand abruptly, as if he'd revealed too much. He stepped back, control snapping into place again. "Get some sleep," he said, voice firm. "Tomorrow we finish this." Rebecca whispered, "Finish this?" Jun-Ho's eyes held hers. Min-suk's threat. He left. Rebecca stood there, heart pounding, hand still warm where he'd touched it. The next 2 weeks moved fast. Jun-Ho's alliance finalized. Chairwoman Park signed. Cameras flashed as Jun-Ho and Rebecca stood together, perfect, calm, powerful. And Min-suk's influence began to collapse quietly, like a building being dismantled brick by brick. Rebecca didn't see the details, but she saw the results. News reports about corporate investigations, sudden resignations, deals falling apart. Jun-Ho was destroying Min-suk without firing a single visible shot. One night, after the alliance celebration dinner, Rebecca returned to the mansion and found Jun-Ho in the library again. He stood by the window, city lights reflecting in the glass. Rebecca stepped closer. "Is it over?" Jun-Ho's voice was quiet. "It's finished." Rebecca exhaled shakily. "So, I'm free." Jun-Ho turned, gaze intense. "If you want to be." Rebecca's pulse jumped. Jun-Ho. He walked toward the desk, opened a drawer, and pulled out the contract. Rebecca's stomach tightened. Jun-Ho looked at her as if he was making a decision that scared him more than enemies did. Then he tore it. Once. Twice. Again. Paper ripped like chains breaking. Rebecca stared. "What are you doing?" Jun-Ho's voice was low, ending the lie. Rebecca's throat went dry. "The money." Jun-Ho's gaze held hers. "The 5 billion is yours regardless." Rebecca's breath caught. He stepped closer, holding the shredded contract like it was proof. Then he said, quietly, "But will you be my wife? Not because of a contract, but because you choose to be?" Rebecca's eyes stung. She looked at him, really looked. At the ruthless man who had frightened her. At the controlled man who had protected her. At the lonely man who had admitted fault. At the man who had learned to care in a world that punished softness. Rebecca swallowed hard. You're asking me to trust you. Jun-Ho's voice was quiet. Yes. Rebecca's lips trembled. You're asking me to choose you. Jun-Ho nodded once. Rebecca's chest tightened, then something inside her settled, like a decision finally landing. She smiled through tears. Yes, Jun-Ho. Jun-Ho's eyes darkened. Relief, disbelief, something dangerously tender. I choose you, she whispered. Jun-Ho exhaled like he'd been holding his breath for a year. He stepped closer, careful, as if he didn't want to scare her. Then this time, he said, voice rough, you're not my solution. Rebecca's voice softened. What am I then? Jun-Ho's gaze held hers. You're my home. Rebecca's breath caught. Jun-Ho lifted her hand, pressing a kiss to her knuckles, gentle, respectful, unhurried. No contract, no audience, just choice. And for the first time since she'd signed her name in that lavish office, Rebecca felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Safe. If you enjoyed this Afro-Korea story, don't just watch, join the family. Hit subscribe and turn on the bell so you don't miss the next episode. I'm reading every comment. Like this video if you felt the twist, and share it with one friend who loves Mafia romance. Because the next story is even crazier.